Hi guys, we're back for another Sunday show, and I would like to start off by just thanking everybody that supported the channel and watched the recent videos all the way through. So I've seen that, and it helps me get watch hours, and it definitely gets me in the algorithm. So I appreciate if you even hit the like button. So if you want to even cash at me at um cash symbol KLOOTWYK. So cash symbol Klutwick. And we'd appreciate any donation, but don't feel obligated because I know how bad it is. And like I said, I just do this for free. I love to share knowledge and just get the truth out there or things I believe to be the truth. So it's a good enough reward just to know that I've helped somebody learn something. It's more than money to me. Our first show was about Abraham Lincoln's actions and pretty much talking about a period between 1860s and 1890 where Pan Americanism pretty much ended, uh, and we talked about the Russians, the crown, and the situation with the Japanese from 1890 to 1905, and so that was real cool. But our second show was about the Monroe Doctrine and Pan Americanism and Pan Germanism, where we uncovered the truth on the Lusitania and FDR's tactics to enter the war and to be the world police for the crown. And and that was pretty much from 1890 to 1946. And 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 there's a connection for now that I will later prove that FDR is a Fabian. So we know that to be true. Tonight's show is another continuation of last week's show, just like an amalgamation of different subject matters about the same periods of time, the same people. Uh, uh, so my goal is to give you an inside look into history and current events and how these Fabians have completely controlled over everything we are seeing and going through today. So at least since 1930s, these Fabians have been insulating themselves into high positions in our government here in America. So uh, many men and women in Washington collaborate together in the socialistic movement where they are directly responsible for breaking down our constitutional form of government and substituting it with a social idea, of centralized government. So, like I said before, Fabianism is a true Trojan horse to in America, and we have to be on our p's and q's and know that it's still happening and that we need to uncover a lot of these people, and we will do tonight. And like I said, communists and Fabianism go together like horse and carriage, but I thought about it a little further, and Fabianism and communism is a synergy. You know what I mean? So that's a combined effect to together to become more powerful than by itself. So to me, the single word fascist is a synergy. Just because it's a fascist is a bundle of sticks, and to me, that's a big synergy, which is more of a amalgamation, a blend to fuse or mix a lot of ideas. So the bundle of sticks is crazy. And the United States dime still has a bundle of sticks on the backside of the coin. So the symbols used in other cultures and groups of socialist movements too. So the Fabian symbols are like the turtle, where slowly but for surely win. So and one of their other major symbols is the wolf in sheep's clothing, and this is the title of the show because that's exactly what they are. And the bundle of sticks is also one of their symbols, and so is the foot on the eagle is actually one of their symbols also. So every person, in particularly, all true Americans should read the book by Rose Martin, Fabian Freeway, the Fabian Freeway, where she maps out everything. I'm telling you. About the people and structure of British Fabianism, where Fabianism really comes from, which was a branch and stem from Rome, but we'll get into that too. And where it was transferred to Washington, D.C. as American Fabianism. And as we talk about it before, the Crown had georamas that oligarchs funded Fabian sects of champagne socialists to design and shape Washington, D.C. from inside these georamas, which we will get to when we talk about georamas, and I unveil that whole subject. Is mind blowing, so many different areas, and man, it's so awesome. I love it. But but I forgot to mention the name of this man that was shot and killed. But I believe it was McKinley. But they say he was shot in Buffalo at an exposition, which we'll talk about later. But I believe it was Niagara Falls that he was at. But regardless, we'll get back into this. But it is a mind blowing subject about the georamas. But we'll move on. But we'll also reveal the truth on the 1907 banking crash, where the Schiffs, the Morgans, the Coons, the Lows withdrew their money from the American banks and brought it up to Canada. And the result of withdrawing was the Great Depression and unemployment, all because the Americans were pulling out of the central bank idea. And so we had to be taught a lesson. And I think we seen this happen again for a couple weeks when America froze Russians' bank accounts. Do you remember that? And business wasn't getting paid. People weren't able to cash their checks, all because the Russian oligarch money was frozen. And I believe like special operations and a lot of them type of people had picked up on that type of activity. But like I said, it was probably a plan, but it only happened briefly and they quickly fixed it. But it revealed a lot to me. So we'll talk about that another time. But in 1912, Bernard Baruch financed both sides of Wilson and FDR's elections and campaigns, just like E. Mandel House. E. Mandel House and Bernard Baruch knew each other, did a little bit of business with each other, but they are both Fabians, but they particularly didn't like each other and had different sets of views. Fabianism has many different people, even believers of God, non-believers of God, all that in the same. They all have different objectives and parts and roles to play, and they do, and we'll talk about that more. So, Wilson on December 23rd, 1913, got the Senate to pass the first Federal Reserve Act. And the first Federal Reserve Act, the first president of that was Warburg was the first president of the Federal Reserve Act. And well, he founded the Federal Reserve Act bill through Bernard Baruch and E. Mandel House to Wilson, and he was actually the second after I believe it was Hughes was the first, but I might be getting that wrong. But still, Bernard Baruch was a bigwig Fabian, just like E. Mandel House. But even though they were a part of the same club, you know, when Wilson died, Bernard Baruch prevented E. Mandel House to come to his funeral because even House was Wilson's alter ego until the end. But Bernard Baruch, Wilson, and the American people did not support Mandel House because of his secret dealings with the crown, and eventually got pushed out of government. But we'll talk about that also too. So 1913, anyone should Google this. Anything from 1913 is just jam packed with so many different events. We won't even get into it here because it's just so many. If you like knowledge, just go view it for yourself. And just Google anything politics or war, or anything like at the economy in 1913, and it's a big subject. So in 1917, Warburg gave money to Lenin, and Lenin's real name is, I think, uh, I have it somewhere. I have to look at it. What Lenin was his real name though. But in 1917, Warburg gave that money to Lenin, and we actually mentioned it in the previous video. So by 1919, the CFR, which is the Council of Foreign Relations, also known as the Rockefeller Board, but well, let's move on. Yeah, Henry Ford, and we're going to talk about that. Who was the mastermind of GM's the Cadillac, even though in 1908 they came out with the Cadillac, and then 5 years prior in 1903, Ford came out with the Ford Motor Company, which he was funded by 12 different uh, investors, and so he started the Ford Motor Company in June 16th, 1903. And Ford still being the mastermind of GM, left and just quit everything he was doing with them, and became their competitor. Some good old competitive capitalism. So that was cool, and but I would like to say though, I have to tell you a little bit before we get farther into the story of Henry Ford, that on a separate subject about Henry Ford, in June, with all the riots, we'll get into it, but all the riots that had happened, and in Detroit and a lot of other places, and in June 1967, the riot that was in July, the Ford Foundation announced 265,000 as a grant to the Cleveland Corps, which was a group that went around and spread the message of riots and social reform, and then later on in June they gave them another 165,000 to the Cleveland Corps. And on Tuesday of the riots, after Detroit was in flames for 3 days, you know what I'm saying, Ford gave them another emergency $45,000 grant to the Cleveland Corps. You know what I mean? But but before all this, and uh, Henry Ford borrowed money, and bought supplies on credit. He didn't even have money, so he had his investors and the supplies he got on credit. And Ford used every nut and bolt and burnt every lump of coal there was to make as many cars he could. And he used every dime to build as many cars as he could. And to keep himself out of debt and to pay off his company, uh, he had to send home and lay off all of his workers, and he shut down his factory. Forty made a deal with the all the car dealerships, and saying that buy his car for cash, and if they didn't, they would lose the franchise with him, and he sold every single car and paid off his entire company debt. So he opened the factory back up and hired even more workers and never borrowed a dime again, and as least why he was on the board all the way up into 1948. So Ford made his own bank too after that, and made a foundation that we mentioned. You know what I'm saying? But he made the bank, so he mainly didn't have to deal with bankers, because he went through that whole process and he just disliked bankers. So in 1922, the money was taken out of the banks again and moved to Canada again. And in 1929 caused the stock market to fall for 30 straight months. And how the American people roll, they didn't like that at all. So but that's what gave Ford the only person who had a triple A status was Ford, because of when they backed out and put all the money into the banks. Ford didn't, though. He stood aside from it. So even though he's a Fabianist too, they still make their own decisions here and there, but they're all part of the same group. And even though they argue and have conflict, but I guess it's for the overall struggle of their purpose. And it's just crazy. And you know but that was pretty much the little knowledge I knew on Henry Ford. There's some other things I know, and then there's a book I'm getting into. So if I learn anything more there, I'll let you know. But I also learned where all the Kennedys got their money, and a lot of people don't know these facts, that the original Kennedy, Joseph Kennedy, was a bootlegger, the original bootlegger through the Prohibition. He was the biggest criminal of them all. You hear a lot about all the famous bootleggers, big and small, and I'm telling you that old Joe was the biggest bootlegger there was, dog. And he had a monopoly on all the British bourbons and wine, any liquor. If it was coming in the United States, and he had goons and a whole organization set up to sell, deliver, and manage and control people, and make sure he was getting 25 cents per bottle sold. That's a monopoly on the game. But since we're talking about JFK, I will have to mention this because I share it with so many other people. But I had it on my channel before, but I'm gonna talk about it now real quick. And that was the assassination of JFK and what happened to JFK. JFK, there was a lot of things going on and shooters and things like that, but I watched the video and I did a slowdown of the original release video. And I will say that the driver pulled out a gun and with his left hand over the right shoulder shot Kennedy. And I caught it on the frame 313 in the video I'm going to put in this title. After the show, I'm going to put it in the comment sections, 2 videos. And one is Stuart Crane talking about JFK and the LA ballistics, and which was the best in the world at the time. And he came to the conclusion the shot came from 5 or 6 feet away. And then Dr. Stuart Crane said he knew a lot of powerful people and judges, and they said that a few of them said that a frame of the picture of JFK's assassination was took and sent to every house of power and judge in the land, and that it was a socialist plot, to kill JFK, but it was from the Secret Service. And that's what they failed to tell you guys, you know what I mean? So I'm going to put the 2 links in this video after the show, and I'll prove it to you, that JFK was killed by his driver with the kill shot. But, but let's move on. But we are going to do one video revealing the mini Fabius and the ones already that we talked about, but also like John J. McCloy and Clark Clifford, George Bernard Shaw, even modern day Fabianists like the known grandson of Eric Pickles, Leonard Wolf, William Robson, Hugh Dawson, who was a chancellor at some point, even Evan Durbin, Tony Blair, who was the one who unveiled the replacement of the Fabian window. So if you don't know about the Fabian window, go there and look at it, and you'll see everything. They got videos on it, and it's a good stuff, man. So I would definitely go check it out. And Clement Attlee, you know what I'm saying? All Fabians in America, but let's take it back a little bit, and talk about the father of Fabianism, which pretty much is the Fabian strategy, where they, their society adopted Quintus Fabius Maximus Verrucosus, was the founder of the guerrilla warfare in Rome, the one who defeated Hannibal. But the tactics and mission statement of Fabianism is exactly what his strategy was based on. And he employed it through the whole Second Punic Wars against Hannibal from 218 to 201 BC. But 2 years before, in 203 BC, he died, but still won the battle after he was dead. So the roots of Fabianism are pretty far back. But we'll break down the 4 pillars of Fabianism. You can Google it for yourself. But audiobook, The Fabian Freeway, like I said, and it's on there, and every American should view this book and get a better understanding on, what being a true American is, and backed by the Constitution, the original Constitution. But she breaks it down so good, and reveals these people's sick control and domination on the mind and the American institutions. The four pillars gave birth to the Labor Club, who use the Theosophical Society motto, there is no religion higher than truth. But I have to add on that the word religion is not mentioned in the Old or New Testament, not one time. God is truth, and their statement is more like a legion. Uh, it's their legion against truth. The Fabian prime minister admitted that 17 government ministries were free on in February 1947 to enter private homes without search warrants. 10,000 officers and officials had the authority to invade any English men for inspection, subject to arrest or anything. 30,000 violators were recorded. And I mentioned this because this is the Fabianist land right here. This is where it comes from. In political science, there's over 250 different forms of government. Marxist places these groups down to, pretty much the Borgias and the proletariat, the theory of splitting classes, and that's what all wars are pretty much are, class wars. They're not governmental wars, state against state. It's classism against people. So you have to understand that uh, that the splitting of classes doesn't solve any problems. Anarchy is used to create problems, not solve problems. Democracy always will turn into a tyranny and slavery. A leader of a democracy is called a tyrant. Google 1928 John Peppers using the black man as cannon ball fodder. You know, uh, Violence is what they're after, not peace. Civil rights means created by government. A right means something that can be taken away from or added to. You know what I mean? It can't be altered in any way. A republic restricts and limits the reach of government. All democracies end in a police state and or a welfare state. Democracy makes stealing legal, which is moral theft. You know what I mean? Uh, the right wing extremist is used by someone who wants to advance their socialistic views to the public. I know it all about these guys. I studied it. But even like fellow traveler means just a convert communist. Fellow traveler also means people on that long march. Which is the revolutionary journey towards communism. So keep your eyes and ears open, man, for these spook tactics, because we are Americans. Shit, Marx and his alter ego Frederick Engels are also Fabianists who are both puppets to the crown. Like I said, the turtle wins the race. This is like a Fabian phrase to me, which a lot of known Fabian women have used too, and we'll talk about them. Uh, but uh, the turtle always wins the race. To me, that's like a MK Ultra tactic or a technique to use to put an idea and plant it in your brain as a seed, and then and later on with other things water that idea so that seed grows. every word is a seed then, and they're growing words inside your mind, and how do you know what is a seed? You know the seed by knowing the fruit that it came from, so you can identify any seed, what I mean. But to get into some of these people, and like this woman I said that represents the turtle and says the turtle wins the race, is like Sydney and Beatrice Webb. Sydney is a really predominant man, but his wife was really capable and wrote many of doctrines and manifestos and helped many of movements, and we'll get into that too. But Sydney had a photographic memory, and he remembered everything. But Webb's work together as a group uh, led to the publishing of the Fabian News in 1891 for members only, and and to this day they still have Fabian News, and but like but to get back to understanding Fabianism and how they affected America since before 1930s for sure, but after the 1930s, all through the 1900s, even with the school boards, what I mean. But like SOFIS is a service of the Association of Schools and the Program of Public Health. And people don't know about that. ASPPH, which represents EPH, Schools and Programs of Public Health, which is a Fabian opinion shaping group and organization. The Fabians, along with Sydney and his wife Beatrice Webb, are directly responsible for the infiltration of the school boards since the 1900s, but up until 1945. And that's when they switched into a different doctrine, and during the war with riots, but we'll get into that. But and we have seen um, all this happen again under Trump, how the government has been weaponizing people against the American people and parents. And in 1854, Beatrice Webb released the Minority Report of the Poor Laws, commissioned by the Great Britain Royal Commission on the Poor Laws and Relief of Distress. Later printed in the Fabian News as the doctrine, along with Rose Martin's observations on Beatrice's roles in the Fabianists groups and sects that formed together like a bundle of sticks, was what she was directly responsible for forming the Labor Party, Beatrice Webb. So, and that's two different separate sources, very reliable sources, making this claim. So Fabians are a hierarchy of London, and has many of social societies that are local, and that are all shells or more or less shields to the crown. And Fabianism is the mother society there. That is the source of the program and the directions and the propaganda that is all handed down to them local societies. And it's like a ring inside a ring structure. So if you know anything about that, and ooh. But when you get time, Google the revolutionary radicalism, pretty much manifesto, I'll call it, but on volume 2 of it, and look at page number 1999, and read that motto. So they got a creed in there, and I don't want to say it, so get in there if you are interested, and read it. And then look up the 1919 Marxist attacks Germany with the Spartacus uprising. That was crazy. Interesting stuff. So like um like I said, Vladimir Lenin. I think his middle name was like Lynch with two L's or something. But I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I think it's like Julianov or something. I don't know. But Robert Morris Lovett was an editor and secret signer of this Humanist Manifesto in 1933. But the manifesto was written by Raymond Bragg, another Fabianist, and in 1943, Lovett was charged by the Dies Committee, DIES, Dies Committee. You're gonna die. With communist subversion and being involved with left wing individuals and groups. So they were on it at that time. It was war times, and they were combating a lot of this pan Germanism and the crown stuff, you know. So and but in 1946, Lovett wins an appeal, and he received a whole bunch of back pay. So he was vindicated of his accusations. But the Humanist Manifesto 2, which there are three manifestos altogether, but which are all anti-God, secular humanists, which is very dangerous. And I read a huge book on secular humanism before, and just like there's over 27,000 new religions in the last 100 years, and it's just crazy to really get into that. And out of all those, only one stands uh, like a theoarchy. But yeah, for sure. But the Human Manifesto 2 was written by Paul Kurtz and Edwin Wilson, and the Fabians are definitely professional by going by another name. So, they are definitely also Fabians. And in 1932, the social revolution, uh, by a peaceful deal, you know what I mean, was created. You know what I mean? It was called the New Deal. And look up the book by Stuart Chase called The New Deal. Mandel House stated he disliked the Constitution of the United States so much, and it was mentioned even in this book. And that's crazy. But in 1920, Rose Schneiderman's Shirtwaist Workers became the founding member of the Civil Liberties Union. So that's a converted Fabianist right there. Also, William Woodland was the first treasury for FDR, and Frank Walker sold his chain of houses, of motion picture houses, to Paramount, and who they obtained it from a deal between Bernard Baruch and E. Mandel House. So they had a joint deal on that. But and FDR used to hang out with a lot of Hollywood West Coast movie moguls. So E. Mandel House stated, "I have no desire to displace the king I helped put in the on the throne. That the power I seek is the power behind the throne." So you got to see what kind of character you're messing with when you're messing with Mandel House. He was slick, he was persuasive, he was a lot of different things. They call him mysterious, but he was the source of and the lead passage of what pushed the Federal Reserve Act too. And Mandel and Wilson both were willing to sacrifice national self-determination, willing to bargain territories and populations for the so-called peace. Even when Mandela was pushed out of government, he was still in charge and still had the same power as he did before. Robert Lanton, the person that took his place in Washington, it was like a running joke that they would say, "How do you spell Robert Lansing?" They would say House, House, because they knew that House was still running the show, and people have to realize that, uh, Mandel and Wilson in 1916's election. They say that he was pushed out of government, of course, so he wasn't involved, but he was definitely involved in the 1916 election. So now we know the difference between Wilson and House, and Wilson's first term, where he had good standing, and in 1916, Mandel was a rogue, alter ego doppelganger of the president. Woodrow Wilson let House structure and plan his, plan his whole structure of his campaign, and he was also financing, guarded all his finances, and he chose all the speakers to speak for Wilson and provided tactics and strategies. Mandel was also the one who handled Wilson's assets and held the biggest liability too. The potential liabilities. It was, but he had the funds, even though he wasn't that funded. Baruch was a kingmaker. He had a lot of money. Mandel House had status and stature and some wealth, but he had groups where he could easily get it funded more than, maybe even Baruch is through his persuasion. But that's why Mandel House assembled a group for Wilson of 126 scholars called the Inquiry, which became a big fail because none of the scholars were experts or scholars in European politics. So, House authorized Wilson through these guys, which he Raswell used to come up with him the 14 points of Wilson's presidency. But Wilson and the House sat together January 15th, finally, after not coming together and not showing, because Wilson knew he was his speaker, his mouthpiece in public, and forever will be to the end. But he didn't personally like him, and they had inner beefs going on. But they did meet on the 15th of January 1918 at 10:30, and the League of Nations was born. That was the precursor of the United Nations. House also was involved in the International Peacekeeping League. You know what I mean? Their motto was a kind of peace that will end all peace. So even the kingmaker Bernard Baruch said Email and Dow House has the blackest type of treason in him, and so that's their little beef, and so let's move on and talk about a little bit about the riots and how the crime rate has started to rise during the first riots in 1945, when the U.S. government stated that we had 38 riots that year, and that was during war times. So, you had a lot of probably groups that was out there, and the solution was to add money to the low income areas and by doubling it, and it intended to help the black community to receive about $8,000 a month for their whole lives, but they never use it in them ways, in the way they were intended to use the funds. But they funded subversion and American people through the government. We have seen the result. You know what I mean? Because in 1966, the government says they had 89 riots as a result of funding it. So they doubled the money again and created in 1967 137 riots. That doesn't sound like what we see as true peace, right? That's a lot of opposite of peace going on right there, right? That's a lot. So that's like they ended up double funding it again right away, and then the next year in 1968 there was 189 riots. That sounds like urban warfare. That's a urban battle more than it's urban peace. Yeah, these people are sick, and their recruiting grounds are like prison and colleges. I'll break all this down another time, but peace has nothing to do with equality of money. You know what I mean? Uh, to believe in that is just believing in a false assumption. When you believe into that, there's a what's really being applied and said in that Marxist manifesto. The only way to have true peace is to eliminate economic causes of struggle, meaning that if you eliminate if you give financial equality, that there would be no struggle, and that's just not true. But money won't eliminate the struggle. I won't even get into it, but let's say hypothetically, all of us were divided equal shares of money, and said go, many people would be broke. Some people would lose it. Some people would give it away. So you have to be wise that it would never be good, and they would always have to fund it continuously. And these are unrealistic goals, and that's their whole principle of economic determinism. So look into that. It's communication, how we're gonna communicate if we how are we gonna even communicate if we can't even define definitions with each other. It's crazy, especially when these people are mixed people up so much they even consider a poor class as parasites that can't even think for themselves or make decisions for themselves. True peace, I believe, only comes through Jesus the Christ, you know, uh, and I'll say that they want you to scream law and order. When you call for law and order and to end violence, uh, that's a call of law and order, but not a call for liberty. So you got to understand the difference. So uh, we'll probably look at these assassinations and just uh, talk about the people and their affiliations, like even like John Wilkes Booth or Botha. He was a anarchist and Marxist. Leon F. Kolkosh, Kolgosh, yeah, the Polish guy who shot President William McKinley. Like I said, not by Niagara Falls, but in Buffalo, New York, on September 6, 1901. But he was at a Pan Americanism exposition, and had also been at Niagara Falls. But President McKinley died from September 14th, 8 days later, after being shot from gangrene, though. So, but Leon Kolgosh was also an anarchist and a Marxist. And James A. Garfield was shot by his jealous little friend. You know what I mean? And Charles Julian Guiteau, which is also a Marxist, you know, and um, uh, Giuseppe, you know, Zangara was one of the attempted assassins, the attempted assassination on FDR, and shot him. And he was also a Marxist and a anarchist. You know, are you getting a trend growing here? Saran was a Marxist and an anarchist, you know, and he's the one that shot Robert Kennedy, you know, and he was supposed to die in a gas chamber, and they commuted his sentence to life in prison. And now, by all people, Gavin Newsom, of all people, is the one that put and petitioned laws to suggest to releasing him. So now Saran got a parole, but his out date isn't scheduled yet. But that's crazy. And it would be Gavin Newsom in on that. That's crazy. So, in conclusion, that all these anarchists and Marxists are being used when it comes down to it, and they're all being used by these oligarchs, you know, and who are also puppets, you know, to their masters, the Fabians, you know what I mean, and Fabianism. And so we'll get into a lot of that stuff another time too. And just know that next week we'll probably start a different series or something new, and talk about some more subjects. So you know, I'm just excited and to give you what I got set up for you guys next week, and hopefully you guys come view it again. So have a good night, guys. I'm gonna end the stream.